All right, I think we're about ready to get started. A few minutes late as people have gotten stuff together, but good to see everybody. We'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. Here in the boardroom is Ms. Carter, Chair Mahaffey, Vice Chair Haggerty, and online are Ms. Kushner, Ms. Scott, and Ms. Johnson-Hostler. So welcome all. The first item of business, we've got a number of things on the agenda today, but the first item of business is approval of the minutes from our October Facilities Committee meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the minutes and I move adoption.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The minutes have been approved. Very good. All right. The next item on the agenda is a name for E53, a new elementary school in Apex. Ms. Parker. Is your mic on? I'm not sure I completely hear it. There we go.
There it is. I apologize.
You're good.
I'm pleased to bring for you today an opportunity to name a new elementary school in Apex. The board acquired an assemblage of 28.8 acres in Apex for a new elementary school, pre-K, or other educational support component. Naming of the new school facility, known as E53 currently, is now required. In accordance with Board Policy 9300, the following names are offered for consideration: South Salem Street Elementary, South Depot Elementary, and Pleasant Plains Elementary. South Salem Street Elementary is proposed as it identifies the road from which the school will be accessed and will help to specifically identify the location of the site. South Depot Elementary is proposed as it refers to the nearby railway along which a future train depot location has been identified across from the school site. Pleasant Plains Elementary is proposed as the site is located near Pleasant Plains Road and the town of Apex's Pleasant Park. I would refer you to the exhibit that we provided as backup to give you an idea of the proximity to the particular references that we've made. As you can see in the upper graphic, South Salem Street runs along the frontage of the E53 site. Just south of that, you can see the location of where Pleasant Plains Road and the town of Apex's Pleasant Park is located. And then on the on the bottom graphic, you can see the existing railway and the town's future plans for a rail and bus transit center. There are potential plans for one across the street from the school, just a bit north, and then there's one further downtown. As you know, the railway through Apex has some historic value to it. It's been there for quite a long time. Apex is the high point on that railway, as I recall, between Richmond and Miami. So it also is sort of a nod to the fact that we're part of a planned development known as Depot 499. So it helps with the general location, but it isn't so specific to target a particular neighborhood. I will share with you that we had the opportunity to collaborate with the town's planning staff. They have an area plan in development known as the South Salem Plan. So there's some alignment with their planning efforts and how the community describes that area that they suggested that we might consider. Staff would recommend selection of South Salem Street Elementary, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions or comments? Ms. Mahaffey.
I was surprised to see the recommendation for South Salem Street, seeing as we have Salem Elementary, and I know there are a lot of pleasants and creeks and groves and plains and trains and automobiles in our so I was curious to see that, but I was also curious as to why South Depot and not just Depot for the elementary school. Was it just sounded better, or?
I think it was to distinguish from the traditional depot in downtown Apex that most are familiar with.
Okay.
That it's located more in the southern portion of Apex.
Okay. I've been thinking on this for a bit, so I don't have a
I had the
Yeah.
same question. I mean, we have the Salem middle and elementary schools, and to add yet another Salem did not seem the wisest.
We also considered some alternatives. The Hunter family, which is related to the original Isaac Hunter's Tavern that is ever present in North Carolina history, owned this property for years and years. But yet we have a Hunter Elementary.
Right.
So we chased as many options down the usual paths, and we're not able to find something that aligns as cleanly with 9300. We can certainly look at a different option that's a bit more random, if you will, but it's less likely to have sort of the descriptive benefits, although they may be tenuous in some cases of these three.
Well, I appreciated not 540 elementary, so, but I think if I were leaning towards any of them, I would lean towards Pleasant Plains. I know that's a park that's been in development. Perhaps there's some future interlocal use with that park, with a lot of different amenities, and it'll at least help folks know where or the area near it. It's not immediately adjacent, but and it's far enough from Pleasant Grove that I don't know that I don't think it would be a problem, or folks won't get it mixed up. But I'm worried that the Salem and South Salem would be a bit too similar.
Ms. Carter?
Yeah, I was just going to say that was my concern too, with so many other Salems, and I agree with the Pleasant Plains. I think that's a distinction that hopefully folks can identify. And I don't know, are there possibly any plans for joint use in the future with them? Has we even gotten that far?
Not typically with an elementary school. This is subject to design, of course, so we'd want to be sure that once the elementary school design was complete, that we had the full on-site access to all the programs that we would have. But it does align both the school and municipal, in effect, community amenity around this 540 intersection. So on one side would be the school and pre-K and perhaps other use, and then on the south is this. So it's really that interchange with 540 that you could easily use as a geographic locator to both of these community amenities.
I appreciated that Scotts Ridge South Campus was also not on the table. And I did like South Depot as a nod to, I mean, wherever you are in Apex, even if you think you're far away from a train, you're going to hear it. So I did appreciate that, and certainly provides to some great, so really, I mean, those two, Pleasant and South Depot, are the two that I prefer.
Good discussion. Any other comments and/or a motion for which we should bring to the board?
And again, I would again remind you that you are absolutely free to offer anything different. Staff likes to get the conversation started, but it's at the pleasure of this committee as to the recommendation. With whatever motion you make, that recommendation we would take forward to the board's meeting on January 18th for approval, and staff recommendation would align with the decision that you make today.
Pleasant Plains, South Depot, Pleasant South Depot. Ms.
Dr.
Mahaffey.
Martin, I would like to make a motion to name this Pleasant Plains Elementary School. And I think it provides some, although it's not on Pleasant Plains Road, it certainly leads to people where it's at. And I think having more options and more discussion would probably lead us back to a similar place.
I think you're right. Do we hear a second? Second by Ms. Carter. We have a motion from Ms. Mahaffey, second by Ms. Carter. Any further discussion? I don't see any hands up online. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, we will move that to the full board. The next item, jumping between windows, is the name for E49, a new elementary school in Fuquay-Varina.
Thank you, Chair Martin. As the board is aware, we acquired an assemblage of about 65 acres in Fuquay-Varina for use as both an elementary school and a middle school. This is the site where the Fuquay-Varina Middle School is being relocated into a new facility. The naming of the new elementary school facility is now required. In accordance with Board Policy 9300, the following names are offered for consideration: Bowling Road Elementary, Kenneth Creek Elementary, and Southern Fuquay-Varina Elementary. Bowling Road Elementary is proposed as it identifies the road from which the school will be accessed and will help to specifically identify the location of the site. Kenneth Creek Elementary is proposed as it references the nearest geographic feature, which is located at the eastern boundary of Board's property. Southern Fuquay-Varina Elementary is proposed as it identifies the area of Fuquay-Varina within which the school site is located and will also help identify the location of the site. Staff's preliminary recommendation is for Bowling Road Elementary. And again, referring you to the exhibit, we've provided a graphic at the top section that gives you the proximity to both Bowling Road and Kenneth Creek. Bowling Road is the road that extends to the east off of South Main Street. And from there, our main school driveway will be extended. The blue line with the floodplain shown along our eastern boundary is where the Kenneth Creek feature is located. And then the lower graphic just gives you a reference for where the E49 site is located within Fuquay-Varina, and clearly it's in the southern portion. So those were the three names we'd offer for your consideration and input. This would be on the same track with the other. We'd bring it forward on January 18th with whatever the recommendation of the committee is.
All right, we hear the recommendation from staff. Any discussion? She is online. I believe this is in your district, Monica?
It is. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Historically, I'm generally in favor of naming it after the road. However, when I read this a couple of days ago, my thought kept being, we don't actually call any of our schools by its full name. Like, I have a lot of schools in my district by the road. So we call them Banks and Vance versus Road. So I kept thinking, bowling? Will we call it bowling? So Ms. Parker, we definitely have to start moving to calling it by its full name if it's Bowling Road. I'm perfectly fine with that. Again, it's largely because my personal opinion is I don't necessarily like using north, south, east, and west in our school names, just personally. And so I'm inclined to support the Bowling Road, but definitely open to other creative options. And as always, thank you, Ms. Parker, and your team.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. I will mention that we have collaborated with Town of Fuquay staff. Fuquay-Varina in particular likes to have their council weigh in, and we're advised that we've been asked to update them at the conclusion of this meeting. Their board will have some discussion at the next meeting. So if they have any additional feedback, we'll have it before it comes back to the full board.
So, Ms. Parker, did they weigh in initially, or are they going to wait and weigh in after you report back?
They didn't weigh in on a particular choice, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. They did help us to round out a slate of 3 options. We ran into the same, naming is not as easy as it looks. We ran into some of the same obstacles before and cleared all of these with them as those that staff felt were reasonable options. They leave the recommendations on a particular name to their board.
I concur with you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, that, north, south, east, west are not good names for a school. And I think we've also all found some of the challenges if municipalities' names are in the school because assignments can't follow municipal jurisdictions. But I also hear your concern and thought the same thing. Are we going to talk about Bowling Elementary School? So we'd have to be pretty clear that it would be Bowling Road. Any other comments?
I mean, just personal preference. I liked the Kenneth Creek name, but I'd give deference to, Ms. Johnson-Hostler and whatever the input we got back from the community down there.
Yeah, I share that perspective. Ms. Johnson-Hostler, what are your thoughts about Kenneth Creek? Any?
My first thought was Kenneth is a name, and I don't want to have to do the history to figure out how we named the creek after Kenneth, especially given the climate of having recently changed a name. Again, it's not a whole name, but that's why I didn't initially lean towards a school with a name that could be construed as a person's name in it. And I would imagine it is probably named after someone. So that's why that wasn't a top choice for me.
Well put.
Agreed.
All right, so I think I'm hearing a sort of, by default, going toward the Bowling Road Elementary School. Does anybody want to make a motion to move that name to the full board?
I'm certainly, Ms. Mahaffey and I share Fuquay, so I haven't heard if you have an opinion before we close it, Dr. Martin.
I'm good if you're good, Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. So yes, Dr. Martin and I will certainly move that we move forward with recommending Bowling Road Elementary.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. We will move that name to the full board and note that we are still open to consideration should the town of Fuquay have, Fuquay Marina have additional perspective for us.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and happy holidays to all.
Thank you. All right, staying on the elementary school construction theme, today we will get on the introduction to the schematic design for a Buckham Elementary School rebuild. Welcome, team. Let's see, Elizabeth, you going to lead off?
It's going to be under Sandy Wayne's. Do I need the ball so that I can present? Right, where is she? This is not number good. She doesn't have the slide up. Annie, where do you have your thing? All right.
Please bear with us.
Technology is always fun.
Yes. Please bear with us. We are getting there. All right. Thank you, Chair Martin, for giving us this opportunity and other committee members this afternoon to present to you the Balkan Elementary schematic designs. We're very excited about this project. I think it's going to be a great project for the community and surrounding neighbors. Today I have with me Elizabeth Wakeford, who is one of our senior planners, and also Alice Reese, who is our senior site planner. They will be presenting, so I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, if you would like to start.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As many of you know, Buckham Elementary is a beloved school in an established downtown Apex location, first built in 1965. Over several decades, multiple buildings and mobile classrooms have been added to the campus to form what we know as Buckham today. Given the age and apparent condition of many of the buildings and mobiles, this project began with the engagement of our design team, led by Andre Johnson Architects, to perform a thorough and comprehensive Phase 1 assessment of the existing facility, which included both buildings and site. Following an exhaustive study, we were presented with a document which outlined the condition of each building and cited specific and serious deficiencies in building systems, building envelope conditions, ADA compliance, life safety, and current Wake County Public School curriculum standards. This Phase 1 study also looked at life cycle costs for repairing and renovating the existing deficiencies and compared their findings with what a new facility with more energy-efficient building systems, a tighter building envelope, and compliance with current curriculum and ADA standards would cost. In the final analysis, it was determined that renovations and additions to the existing campus would cost $1,444 per student per year, versus new construction of the building and site being $797 per student per year. From this study and its conclusion, it was determined that the Buckham Elementary School would best serve its current and future populations through a complete demolition and rebuild. Slide 2. As this project is a very tight-knit existing community school, we've established a set of guiding principles by which to adhere through the development of the new building and site design. We want to honor the school's community history as a neighborhood school while implementing current curriculum standards and overall improvements for both existing and future staff and students. The new school building will provide a campus identity which is unique to this school community and which embraces its diversity of cultures by providing a sense of belonging to all students and staff. As a neighborhood school, Buckham will promote walking and biking to school from the surrounding neighborhoods and continue to be a center for its community. The new school building will be more connected to its site with opportunities for indoor-outdoor activities which enhance learning. Clear circulation and wayfinding in a new single building will welcome visitors, provide enhanced security, and allow an opportunity for large gatherings in a centrally located space. Next slide. Our project goals are simple but very important. Maintaining the existing neighborhood culture is paramount in a community school like Buckham. We want the students and staff to embrace the new building as their own and feel comfortable in and around it on the very first day. With the addition of learning commons into a school community that's never had them, we strive to provide flexibility and choice by accommodating multiple options for small and larger collaborations between students and teachers. Interaction with the outdoors through visual and physical means has been proven to enhance learning and sustained attention for even our smallest students. Airy spaces full of light will be incorporated wherever possible in the new design.
And I'll take you to site-specific plans for Buckham Elementary, starting with the location. We were just speaking of Apex, but to remind you, it's in the southwest quadrant of Wake County in the town of Apex. Buckham is located just behind downtown. Again, the existing community consists of small, single-family homes, so it's rather unlike the newer developments with more density and larger homes. And as Elizabeth stated, it's very important to keep that fabric of the community consistent with the development of the school. Sure. On the screen in front of you is the proposed site plan. The parcel on which Buckham is located has two street frontages on the north side and the south side. On the north side is Cash Street and the south side is Hunter Street. We spoke with the town of Apex, discussing vehicular circulation first and foremost, and understood that the driveways, as they are located currently, are working and working well. And so therefore, we're going to retain those driveway locations. So starting on the site plan at southwest corner, the carpool entrance drive will be located there. One of the major reasons for this, the town of Apex does not allow parking, or they only allow minimum amount of parking in the front of the building. Most of the parking needs to occur on the side or in the rear of the site. So therefore, in order to economize with added impervious surface and asphalt, a good design solution is to wrap that carpool lane around parking lot to achieve required stacking. And that fits nicely on that western portion of the site. I'm also going to point out that in doing so, and this development here allows us to keep a strong existing landscape buffer between the school building and the residents to the west. On the north side of the site, we are locating the play areas for the upper grades. This is currently where play areas are located. And you will notice, I'll call to your attention, a baseball field. Although this is not program, it is part of a very successful JUA with the town's park and recreation, as well as the school community enjoys the use of the baseball field. It's fenced. So what that allows them to do is send out different age groups of children and keep them separate during their recess play. And again, it's a very important community feature, and that was important for us to retain that piece to honor the community again. Swinging down onto the east side, we have service courtyard and then the bus loop as you get closer to Hunter Street. And again, I'm going to call attention to an existing landscape buffer, which we are able to keep because of keeping the driveway as well, with minimal disturbance to the site. On the south side, last but not least, you see sort of a lawn area, and this is becoming our front yard approach to kind of transition from the residential neighborhood to the school use. And we are going to have the younger children playing in that front yard area. Why this is successful is because the bigger kids require the larger open space for their gross motor play. The little kids prefer or engage more in the imaginative play and curiosity play. The front yard here at Buckham has some topography and some unique features that allow us to create actually a very unique play area for the children while meeting play program requirements for the entire campus. Next slide.
All right.
And I know you all have seen schools before, and maybe I can read your mind, and you're asking, where are the mobiles going to go? So we have two options to reach core capacity on the site. If you can advance, Elizabeth.
Okay. Did I go too far?
So the first option,
Did I go too far?
here we are. The first
Yep,
option
sorry.
is using modular classrooms to achieve core capacity, and those would be located north of the classroom bar. What the impacts on the site of this are a little bit decreased play for 3-5, a lot bit of earthwork and a retaining wall would be required. That northwest corner is a low spot on site,
Right here.
so natural drainage or a natural spot to locate stormwater drainage. And in order to save the space required for that, we would need a retaining wall if the mobiles were located there. That puts the mobiles also, it's neither here nor there, but quite visible from the community use after hours. And next slide. So option 2 is actually locating the core capacity within the building itself. And there's small dashed lines, kind of light on the ends of the classroom bars that indicate how the building could expand to house that core capacity. You can see that, again, there's a little bit more play area for 3-5. The entire school use is contained within the face of the building. There's some other bullet points noted as well. Next slide. Can you go back to that?
Sure.
Please.
Yep.
So with that information, therefore, our recommended solution to achieving core capacity would be to add the 4 additional classrooms into the building rather than having mobiles on the site. Along with the advantages noted on the slide, the additional classrooms can be used as flex space, rooms for specials or electives, and myriad other functions until core capacity is reached. Adding 1 classroom on the first floor and 1 on the second at the ends of each classroom wing provides additional capacity for multiple grade levels. This strategy also provides a covered outdoor space at each end of the building for shelter from the sun or rain. Next slide, please. Sure. On this slide, we've rotated the building for better visibility. North is to the left on this slide, and Hunter Street is to the right. So I want to make sure everybody's oriented
Yeah,
correctly.
Hunter Street's over here.
Yep. It says Hunter Street on this side. In this first floor plan, you can see that the main entrance is along the carpool drop-off area and shown with a red arrow. The bus entrance is directly across from it on the opposite side of the building. The diagonal walkway shown in the site plan leads from a sidewalk along the carpool drive to a covered outdoor space adjacent to the south courtyard. From there, walkers to school can be undercover to the main entrance, and admin has eyes on the street for both visitors and students entering the campus. The main larger spaces in the building are located along a wide two-story central corridor, which we think of as the heart of the school. As you enter the building from the carpool drop-off, admin is on the right and student support services is to the left, along with the first grade hallway. Just past admin is the art gallery hall, which leads to the art room with its patio in the front courtyard. Continuing along the central corridor, the media center is to the right with its reading garden in the front courtyard, and the stage and gymnasium are to the left. In the spirit of flexibility, there are movable partitions at the stage, which can be used for closing off the gym for a PE class and allowing the stage to interact with the corridor and media center. And the stage itself can be enclosed to create its own room separate from the corridor and gym. Or both movable walls can be opened along with the media center wall to create one large open space with a multi-directional stage for presentations or other community events. Beyond the heart of the school is the pre-K and kindergarten wing to the right, and music and cafeteria to the left, with beautiful views and access to the playfields and north courtyard. We spoke about the Learning Commons earlier, which are wonderful opportunities to create comfortable and fun spaces apart, but still supervised, from the classroom setting. For the older grades, these Learning Commons will provide opportunities for collaborative work among different size groups of students. In the younger grades, the commons are smaller, often providing ideal pull-out spaces for one-on-one tutoring or enrichment, or just a quiet place to read a chapter book. The Learning Commons are strategically sprinkled throughout the building on both floors. Next slide. The second floor is accessed by the main stair in the central corridor and has an upstairs viewing bridge where the stage can be seen. The lower wing, at the bottom of the slide, has the third grade classrooms to the left and the second grade classrooms to the right. At the top of the slide is the fourth and fifth grade wing. In both these first and second floor plans, the space for the additional classrooms is shown at the ends of the wings. Next slide. This is a view that shows the activity of the heart of the school, a two-story central corridor with the stage and gym beyond, and the main learning stair, and the media center to the right. Next slide. This view is looking the other direction and shows the opportunity to view the stage from both the main learning stair and the viewing bridge on the second floor. Right now, we're still working on the exterior elevations and views of the buildings, and we will plan to send those to this facilities committee as soon as possible after the first of the year.
So I'll speak a moment about some more of the outdoor spaces closer to the building themselves. I'm really excited about this because the interior arrangement of the building provides opportunities for the required programming associated with some of those interior spaces to be located right outside in nooks and nestled right in there in the building to support curriculum in ways that we've found most successful for teachers. So they're directly adjacent to the building. There's high visual connection from interior to exterior. And again, the way the building is arranged, it creates quiet little spaces that the teachers feel more comfortable to take their kids outside or allow them, like Elizabeth mentioned, the reading garden at the library, to promote programs like Book Buddies or Book Bite, that gives the children those spaces to go outside. And again, highly visible, small, intimate spaces that are actually part of the required programming. These configuration allows us to really address those and work with the design team to create those super special spaces. And that does conclude our presentation right now. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you. A lot of great features. It's good to see over the years that we're incorporating a lot more sort of educational thought into our design. Structure and function absolutely go together, and I think we see that. Like to see a lot of the outdoor spaces. Particularly the pandemic has reminded us, but we should have paid attention to it before. We were starting to. That outdoor classrooms are really a great opportunity for learning, just for a different environment, but also there's so much that can be learned outside. So it's really good to see both those pieces. Comments and questions? Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you. I know this renovation, like so many of our renovations, have been a long time coming. This is probably one of the questions that I get from this community most often of, we know we need this, when is it coming?
Right.
As any board member that has a building in need of renovation understands. I so appreciate the thought that went into this. I know this is a challenging, tight, small site, and to see all that you were able to put in to build stacking, so we're not going out into Hunter Street, but to maintain those buffers for the existing neighbors so that they have a little more privacy, because they're right there. And I'm excited about this front yard experience, knowing the berm that goes up as you walk up to the school site and seeing that as an opportunity for additional outdoor spaces, I think is wonderful. As far as the trailer piece, I like the idea of having the core capacity in the buildings and being able to expand, as we saw with Fuquay Varina Middle. And so I'd be much more open to that than to have mobiles, especially knowing the difficulties we have in moving them. But I'm very excited to see this, and I'm sure the community will be as well. And just as Dr. Martin said, the attention to detail, and I know we're looking forward to see the exterior elevations when they get here. But I appreciate you bringing this. It's like Christmas came to the Buckham community.
So I think you raised an important point that I think we, as a board, want to come to consensus on, or at least majority vote, but I think we'll come to consensus, the trailers versus building the core capacity in. I mean, I think seeing, just like we saw at the Fuquay Middle site, constraints, as they do in many places, limit what we can do with trailers, and a 10-foot retaining wall is A, not trivial to build, and B, hard to make attractive. So there's a lot of value to adding this kind of space into our hard-built capacity instead of our mobile capacity. I think as a board, we just have to make sure that we understand, and schools have to understand as well, in the early days, we're going to love this extra space, as you noted, for specials, for collaborative spaces, for extra opportunities, but in this area, this is a part of our high-growth part of the county. We are going to have to be very clear that these added spaces are not really the generous elbow room spaces, but they are intended to be core spaces. We haven't struck that need just yet, because this would be the second
will
school
soon.
where we potentially would be building the added capacity in, as opposed to having mobiles. But as a board, I think we just need to understand and be clear that if this is the direction we go, which I concur, I think makes the most sense. But I think as a board, we just have to be very clear that if we go this direction, that is capacity. We want to use the space effectively while it's there, but we really have to have that pretty firm commitment that that's capacity space, which will be tougher on the community to sort of rein in opportunities down the road. So where are we as a board?
Just that question.
I think that's the big question that you need to know from us today. Is that correct? Yeah.
Mobiles versus building
Mobiles versus
core.
building it into the core. Knowing that if we go to building into the core, right, it really needs to be a capacity commitment that we're willing to stand behind. Ms. Carter.
Well, I support building it into the school. And what all goes along with having mobiles is not only the expense, the upkeep, the look, the land, all the extra that goes in. And I know it is difficult, and I think that is very important that we're very clear with our school staff, not just administration, but even, the teachers, the IAs, and all of those who are in there, so they understand if it's needed, that's, down the line for our classrooms, that's what it's going to be. Because it can be very easy to set things up, and then it impacts them having to change all that. And so that needs to be acknowledged because it does have a direct impact on what they put in place. So being very clear with that in the beginning, and if there's new staff coming in, to make sure they all understand. So that's where I'm at.
I already shared mine, but I also think that that's a conversation with Mr. Carosa and Ms. Rory and that team to talk about as we're moving kids in and we're doing, 60 or 80% capacity with the school, depending on whether it's middle or elementary, what that means is we're looking at the building capacity and the core capacity and that extension and making sure that we're having that conversation on the front end as well.
I mean, I'd concur as well. It gets into another question that I had outside of this one about the presentation, but, the vulnerabilities that came out in our security audit, for example, around mobile classrooms are a concern in addition to all the reasons that Ms. Carter had mentioned and the points that Ms. Mahaffey made. So I think, at least sitting around the table, I don't know what folks remotely think, but I think we're all agreed.
Yeah, I mean, there are huge security issues, and as we saw back when we did our Trailers 101, we talk about those as temporary spaces. We have no history of them actually being temporary spaces.
Dr. Martin, I don't know if someone has their hand up. I'm on a different platform, and I can't even see how to raise my hand right now, so I'm sorry about that.
You're welcome to jump in. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I concur with what Chairman Haffey said about a bigger conversation with Ms. Roy and Mr. Carosa. I think, and as well, involving our planning commissions for municipalities as well. That's something I think to keep, which I know this already happens, keeping an eye on that, being able to understand what future projects are out there, what the zoning is, are there rezonings on the table for certain areas around those base attendance zones for those schools. So I think that's important, but I think that if we could just have our magic wand, I think everybody would probably support not having modulars on our school campuses.
Any other comments, questions?
Chair Martin.
I think on that issue, because I think you're ready to move on to another issue, right? So I think on that issue, the board concurs with staff's recommendation that we don't go the modular route, but build in as permanent space. Vice Chairman, Chris,
Thank you.
Brain function, please.
I appreciate that. And I didn't want to confuse the issues going back, but this is tied to that.
Sure.
You kept mentioning the topography and some of the unique opportunities, but, sometimes we do get competing interests as you design a school, right? There's a lot of things that go into it. And like we brought up with the mobile units, there are the security issues. And so I was just curious, as you've done the redesign, I believe we'll have an evaluation where a security team, does look at things or does make recommendations. And in terms of sight lines across campus where you have maybe a nice little niche area that's secluded and can be a great quiet learning place, also is it something that can be easily supervised? And I just wanted to make sure those concerns were raised.
Well, I heard that raised multiple times, that a lot of these corners are nice, quiet corners, but do have good sight lines.
Yes.
I think the structure that you have that has the nice corridor between the main entrance and the bus entrance, administrators can see kids coming both ways. Those are good sight lines. And of course, the entry is much better than it currently is. Ms. Mathey.
I did have one more comment, and I was nervous that we would lose seats with this school being rebuilt, given the constraints of the site. And if you would have told me 4 years ago that this would have a core capacity of 800 students, I would not have believed it. And that is an incredible amount of work with your team and the architects involved to make that happen, so that we're actually gaining seats at this school. And just bravo and well done, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? All right. Hearing none, I think we're ready to move on. Thank you for the presentation, and I think you have what you need from us, right?
Yes.
Is
Yes,
the
sir.
support to
Thank you.
go for the permanent capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Very good. All right. The next item on our agenda is an issue that it was raised in some of our strategic planning discussions. What should we focus on here as a facilities committee? And a question that has come up multiple times is what's being done with the PRIMP and SNAP programs? How do we access to those? And so what we have today is sort of the PRIMP and SNAP 101 to both educate us and the community as to what these programs are and maybe how to streamline and make their use a little bit more effective. So with that, Mark?
So I'd like to just make a few comments before they get into the presentation. There's been a lot of work on this. You know, you all may likely be the only ones that haven't seen it because we have shown it and vetted it through many, many people, or they have, Elizabeth and Sandy. There have been a lot of people that have participated in trying to get this process to a point where it was clean, concise, and clear, and we knew what a PRIMP project was and what a SNAP project was. There was no question, and we knew when those projects needed to morph into a life cycle project. And so where we are today, they did not get to this path easily. In fact, we ended up somewhere else. And then after review and critique and criticism, they kind of rethought things. And I believe, based on the feedback that we've gotten so far, we've arrived at a process that, as I said, it's defined. It will allow us to easily communicate it to the parties that need to know what's going on. And I think, again, we've ended up in a good place. And so we have shown it to many people, and I'm anxious for you all to see it today, the work that they've done, and get your critiques and comments.
It's not me and Sherry Jo. Hey, thank you. So, can you get to the next slide? Thank you. Our purpose today is to discuss what defines a life cycle project, what defines a PRIMP project, and what defines a SNAP project. How a facility's need becomes a PRIMP project, how this process will be communicated to staff, and lastly, we would like to answer some questions and collect some feedback. So going to the next slide. So how does a project become a PRIMP project versus a life cycle project versus a SNAP project? So to help us define this is, we have listed here the three types of projects outside of major projects. So as you can see, life cycle, PRIMP, and SNAP. So a life cycle project, if we're just going through this list right here, a life cycle project is replacement of existing systems before failure. So these are items that exist, and they've lived their life cycle, and now we've got to replace them. Some examples of that could be your flooring. It could be painting. It can be that the sidewalks or the carpools, the asphalt is needing repair, needing to be replaced. This could also include like outdoor program spaces, like your tennis courts. They need to be repaired. So these are all existing items that are currently on school campuses that we need to repair. So a PRIMP project, partial renovation and improvement. So the definition is partial renovations and improvements on school campuses. But what does that really mean? These are needs at older facilities where space standards have changed throughout the years, which creates a deficiency between older school facilities and newer school facilities. These smaller partial improvement projects will help align the spaces of our older facilities with our newer facilities. So examples of these could be an educational program need. A CTE program has changed. There used to be a shop class. Now they need it to be a technical type class. So get rid of all the shop stuff and then bring in and redo the classroom so that you can do it. Maybe it's more computerized. So other things that could, regulatory changes. Now we need more stacking than we used to have. So to get people off the streets, we've got to go and do some renovations to the carpool or the bus loops. And also, we change our space standards. So now we irrigate athletic fields. There are a lot of schools out there that don't have irrigation on their athletic fields, so we need to bring those schools up to our current standard. So that was the intent of those small partial renovation improvements. And then you have SNAP projects. These are space needs analysis prioritization. This is where academic programs may need additional space. They have program needs, so we need to go and purchase land, or we need to lease buildings, or we need to renovate spaces for these needs. So some examples of those are maybe your pre-K center, your bus transportation center, alternative learning programs, maybe even purchasing warehouses. So those are the definition between those three fund lines that we currently are working with. So this slide talks a little bit more about those projects. These are actual projects that we have either completed or in process of being completed using life cycle money, print money, and SNAP money. So as you can see, you've got Brassfield Elementary that falls under a life cycle. It's a slab repair project. You have Broughton High School where they're replacing the HVAC. These are all under your life cycle needs. These are things that are existing on those school campuses that need to be replaced. But what is interesting here and what I wanted to point out is you have Washington Elementary Gym project that falls under life cycle. And then you also see it that falls under the PRIMP, Partial Renovation Improvement Fund line. So we worked closely with our Maintenance and Operations Department to create the project that is going on over at Washington Elementary School right now. And what is interesting is the HVAC portion of the project is actually the partial renovation improvement portion of the project. And the reason that is because Washington Elementary School gym did not have air conditioning. So that was a program item that they needed. So that's what we used our partial renovation improvement money on. And while we were there, and we were disrupting the gym, we went ahead and did some of their life cycle need projects. So that's how I see us all working together to make sure that if we're going to a school and we're disrupting the school, that we're looking at all the needs at the same time, and we can pull all the funds together to create one project that works best for everyone. Then here are some of the SNAP projects you'll look at that we are currently working on or in the process. The pre-K, Millbrook Pre-K Center, the Crossroads renovations just completed. We're getting ready to start a Kingswood Elementary School playfield renovation. That was one where the playfield had major drainage issues, and Real Estate Services went and purchased some additional land for us to give so that we could bring their program up to our current standard. The field's very small. And so now with that additional land, we can grow that outside space and give them a better opportunity. So this is just, I'm not going to go through every single one of the projects, but these are just some examples of projects that we are currently working on. So all of these projects that we're currently working on, because the process that we had was not completed at the time, they came through our facility modification request process that is existing today. Or we might have collaborated with stakeholders and found out that this was a need. So we know we need to have a better and clear process in place. So therefore, that is the big reason we are here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Sandy Wayne, and she will talk more about what the actual process is.
Hello. So now the question is, how does a project become a print project? There are actually two ways for a project to be evaluated for a print project. They're through the ongoing Mdo assessment that's currently in place, as well as the facility needs portal. And what we're doing is we are actually utilizing the facility modification portal that we're using, and we're renaming it to be all-encompassing, because so many of our schools and our central office understand that's where they submit their requests. So we're just going to rename it to be a little bit more all-encompassing, so they know that they have a place to submit their needs. And once they submit that information, it's going to be on our internal website. So right now, the facility modification is on our external website. We did that for fact mods for PTAs to submit. Well, we're going to pull back a little bit because we want to make sure that the school is aware of what's being requested. So we're going to request that it's all going through the school and bring it internally. So once that requester submits the request, the planning team is going to coordinate with stakeholders to review the feasibility of the project request and provide an estimated budget and individual project schedule. Then FD&C will work with the stakeholders to rank and schedule requested projects based on the overall identified needs. The list of projects will then be communicated to the respective facility needs requesters and scheduled accordingly. Now, I think I missed, next one, sorry. Ranking. So I did want to bring up that. So the ranking portion of the show will happen with the stakeholders. We can't just give a one-size-fits-all rank because you're going to have projects requested of different size and scope. So we are going to rank those accordingly and develop a list of criteria with those stakeholders so we can be informed when we are prioritizing these projects that are requested. Okay, next slide. So our next steps are to communicate this process, this new and improved process, with the schools and central services. So our plan is to go to their biweekly senior leadership meetings, and stakeholders can sign up for optional support hours after the presentation to the senior leadership meeting. That's if they have some one-on-one questions, and we can deal with their specific requests a little bit more intimately than just a broad group. We'll also, on our Wake Connect page, which was the internal portal that they'll be submitting, we'll have a whole slew of information for them to understand what they're submitting, how they should submit, and then what they should expect from a planning perspective. And that's all I have.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions or comments?
So I'm sure there are questions because it's been a topic of a lot of discussion. Mr. Haggerty?
Thank you, Chairman Martin. So what I'd like to do, if I could, is I just want to go through some of the slides. I had put questions as you went, but didn't want to interrupt everything. Everything was flowing together nicely. But I want to make sure I understand what becomes a SNAP project, what becomes a print project, what's just a life cycle project. And so when people come to me and ask questions, I can answer them, correctly.
Right.
So on page 3, when we talk about life cycle versus print versus SNAP, I want to use the example of, say, like an athletic track, which is on here. You have an athletic track. An athletic track has a certain defined life cycle, but something happens before the end of that life cycle. It's scheduled maintenance, pits or holes develop. If I'm reading this correctly, that would qualify for print repairs if it was prioritized on the list, because it would be a failure of the structure, even though it would normally be covered by life cycle? Or would something like that athletic track have to wait, despite whatever issues it had, until the life cycle, scheduled life cycle replacement comes along?
Right. Typically, our maintenance and operations department, they're going to patch and they're going to repair the track as long as they possibly can make it still functional. But once it's gotten to a point where it's not functional, it falls on their life cycle list. So that would be repaired under the life cycle projects. If it was a print project, it would be, for an example, if it was a high school that didn't have a rubberized track. I think we all have rubberized tracks now, but I'm just saying for an example. And they are requesting that they do get a rubberized track because that is what is in the standard today, then that would be a partial renovation improvement project. That would be submitted under that, yes.
Thank you. So kind of staying on this page, trying to figure out where different projects go.
Yeah.
We talk about interior finishes, but what about exterior finishes? We talk sometimes with school choice issues about curb appeal.
Right.
Landscaping, exterior painting, things like that. If someone had a really strong perceived need for exterior work, where would that fall?
So that is where we're going to work very closely with our maintenance department, which we already do. So I will get requests in through the facility modification request process, and they'll say, I want to paint the outside of my building. I immediately go to our maintenance department and ask, is this a life cycle need? Is it on our life cycle? And when does it fall into the pattern of getting painted? If it is said that it's going to be 10 years from now before we're ever going to repaint it, then the school may say, I would like to submit for a partial renovation improvement project. That is when the stakeholders will meet to discuss if this need is a high priority need and needs to be addressed for that very reason. Curb appeal. Maybe it's a magnet school. They've converted from a traditional school to a magnet school, and they're trying to promote people to come to this school. It may bump it right up the list to get higher up on the partial renovations list, even though it doesn't fall into the life cycle. I mean, it will, but it's not until a certain years from now down the road.
So for example, if I could, a school that has just become a magnet school, like you said,
Right.
you might be eligible for PREMP funding for program elements.
That's right.
But also could potentially be eligible for PREMP funding for the exterior and some things that might help draw students to it then in that
Right.
case.
So in the past, working through the facility modification request process, I've walked a lot of schools with our magnet programs, and maintenance has been alongside with us. So we'll determine at that time, hey, these are things I can help with, and then these are things that we can help with. So it is very much a joint effort to decide where that falls. And a lot of our projects, some of them could be on the same PO and everything, using just two different fund lines.
To that point, and I think it's a very important one to raise, I think I'm hearing that's what your goal with this new facilities needs portal is to be, is we don't want to get into a situation that, you should have submitted that as life cycle.
That's
or,
right.
you should have submitted that as PRIMP, and therefore it didn't get done. I think I'm hearing that we want to have sort of the one intake, and we'll help decide where is the best bucket for it to go in,
Yep.
with still the recognition that we'll get back to, there's still limited dollars.
Yeah.
We have way more needs than we can accomplish, but what we don't want is to get you into a trap that said, you should have said this is life cycle, when maybe it could have been PRIMP or the other way around.
And I think that's really the issue. As I go around and I talk to people at different schools, will they have guidance if they describe a project as to the best way to pursue it? Someone has a mobile unit. It's not core capacity. They're using it for special programs, electives, and it has a moisture problem or a bad leak. Would they? We don't want there to be available funds that are out there that they don't access because they either requested it from the wrong fund or didn't know how to pursue it. And so through this portal, they could get the guidance, it could be evaluated, and it's not just going to fall on the facility person at the school to kind of know the right one. Is that right?
Exactly. We're
Okay.
trying to take that decision away from them, and it be our decision on how it is addressed.
Great. This makes it much more clear. I appreciate
Yes.
it. Thank you.
If I may, just to build on that, do we have dollar-size buckets for each of these? I mean, obviously, we would love as large a budget line as we can get our hands on, and we could make productive use of pretty large numbers in each of these categories. Do we have sort of, dedicated ideas, this many millions for each? Do we have ideas of dollar sizes for each type of project? Or, again, is all of that pretty variable?
Yeah, so what we're doing with the Mdo assessments is once we get that information back, then we're going to look and see what we're facing, what kind of dollars that we need to put in that bucket. And then we're going to be able to fill in the, schedule out where we're going to complete those identified on the assessments. And then with submittals, we'll come in and put those in on the remaining funds that we have and try to schedule them out equally each year as well.
So in other words, we don't have a fixed, And part of the reason for asking about this, and Mr. Strickland and we have talked about this in some of our planning, and that's where we want to go in January, is to start thinking about budget, right? Because we kind of need to know what dollar values to put into a budget request for the various categories. And I think I'm hearing maybe we don't want the categories to be too tightly confined. It says these dollars are life cycle and these dollars are primp, but rather like the facility needs portal, having some flexibility. We kind of need the kind of a single bucket that sometimes it's going to be life cycle, sometimes it's going to be primp, rather than saying, sorry, I'm out of primp, and it's not life cycle, we can't do it. Is that
We need to see the big picture. And then once we see that entire picture, we can figure out how to accomplish the goals within that picture with the available funding. It could be that we shift some funding around, or that is a request that we do, but the ultimate goal is to communicate to the schools the differences between the projects and take they shared before, take the issue off of them of what the project should be. They just need to tell us that they need a project done and submit it to us, and then we can decide the best way to accomplish the goal of getting it done.
From a budgetary perspective, we're looking at all of these dollars to be part of the CIP rather than the operating budget.
Exactly.
However. So we just need to keep that in mind, that this should always be a line item of a certain size in that CIP. Well, I'm on it. One other question I had is the Mdo assessment for buildings 30 years old and older. Very appropriate, needs to be done. Is this part of our annual assessment, or what's the frequency that we're looking at for that assessment?
So I believe that's an annual assessment as we roll through a certain number of projects each year. Those assessments are due the first week in January, and we're on a pretty tight schedule to get them evaluated and incorporated into some other things that we're planning.
Ms. Carter.
I just had a question. I know you mentioned the communication with the schools, but I know there's a shift. Would that shift from it not being an external availability for folks to click on and submit things? Will there be any communication from the district or put somewhere on a website about how, if they do have a concern about their school, the process for the public? Because I know, some folks, we might get some emails, because I do have, very involved families, and they advocate a lot for their schools, so they're used to being able to take those steps. So is there anything going to be done on that end to?
Yeah, we're going to leave, we have a facility modification webpage, so we're going to leave that webpage because it is informative and there's a lot of information on there, and it tells them, what types of projects to consider, like what are work orders and what are facility modifications, because there is kind of that confusion. But we will put a message on there to please contact their schools for any potential projects that they would like to do. So it'll kind of direct them back that way.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you for this, because this is very helpful information to be able to share with our constituents as well, who often have a lot of questions around this, and rightfully so. So thank you.
I think one of the common things that we have heard is that we really need to over-communicate the process to the schools to make sure they are clear on all of this. And you all haven't asked this question, and I hesitate to bring it up, but I want to anyway. So while this is a defined process, and I believe it will work well, there may be some, what I'll term some legacy projects out there that have been discussed at some point in time that may not fit into some of this. It may not fit as we discussed. And so, we are likely to encounter some projects after we get these assessments that we will have to evaluate how we can fund them, not within here, but maybe in the larger CIP picture. And that's going to be a balancing act between our growth and other renovations that we have planned. I'm sure those projects are out there. I'm not going to mention any that I've heard by name, but I know that this won't be the end of it. We're going to have to figure out how to handle those projects as well.
Any other questions? Ms. Johnson-Hustler, I see your hand up. Okay, we don't hear you. You're still on mute.
Oh, thank you. I think Mr. Strickland might have been talking about me, but I will own that. And thank you for supporting all of my requests. I think I have a lot of these requests that we just outlined. And so Ms. Carter asked my question, but I want to clarify it from the internal school perspective. I think I heard the answer, but I want to clarify. So in some of my schools, particularly the one Mr. Strickland has been helping me with, they had both the principal and an AP both submitting orders, and somehow they were also getting crossed. And so I'm curious if there is any thought around what internal mechanisms can be put in place. And specifically, this is when you have a person out on medical leave or transition of leadership, when the request may have been made, but somebody else doesn't know. So is there any thought on what that internal process will look like?
So, Ms. Johnson-Hustler, I was not thinking about that school. There was another school.
I'm glad I put it back on your mind.
Well, we had toured a school the other day, some of us, and that was the school I was thinking about, but it wasn't this particular one. I think that effort or that process has to be that we, again, over-communicate what we need from the schools in order to get things done. And in this particular case that you and I have discussed previously, I think maybe it just wasn't clear as to what the school needed to provide us or what they needed to do, and we'll just have to figure out a way to make that process clearer to them.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And in that particular school, the AP is generally the person who makes those requests, but she had been out on maternity leave, so there had also been, I think, contributed to that lack of making sure you all got the information you needed. So again, to Ms. Carter's point, just trying to make sure both our forward-facing to our public as well as our internal-facing support in this new process, which I again applaud you all on the new process, is clear when those requests are being made. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for this work. I mean, I think it goes along with the work that this committee has initiated for several years, trying to move to a little bit more objectivity, a lot more clarity in communication. We've developed a lot more prioritization rubrics. I think this goes along that line, where we need lots of information coming in. This is what needs to be done. But then we've got to have a strong assessment protocol that basically ranks. And just because you asked, and you're my buddy, Mark, doesn't mean that we don't take care of Elizabeth needs or something, right? So I think this process is going to help that. And you're right, it's going to take a while till processes sort of become normalized and the culture becomes normalized. But I think this is moving very much in a positive direction that will help our schools and help us to better articulate to the general public and the commissioners the needs that need to go into the CIP for this budget line. So thank you. I think that does what has been asked for a long time on this committee, is trying to get a better clarity, and that through this process. Thank you all. I think this has come to a good point. All right. Speaking of, we've got the CIP plan that it's time to start working on that again. I think, effectively, several years ago, moved to this rolling CIP plan that I think has been useful on multiple fronts, but that means that it is an annual process, and that process really never stops. But we're ready to start sort of the fresh cycle on the CIP planning. So I believe Douglas is going to lead off.
I am.
On that.
Good
Very
to see you all again this afternoon. We'll wait for the deck to come up, please. There you go. As Dr. Martin introduced, thank you very much. Good to see you all again this afternoon, and it's that time again. We're here to give you an introduction into 2022. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our purpose this afternoon is to give you a quick refresher on the makeup of our committee. We'll talk about process and schedule as we look at 2022 and what those deliverables and expectations look to be in various areas. Next slide, please. This will give you a brief snapshot of our committee members. We've taken some time to break this out and show you the different areas of our key stakeholders in our CIP team. Important to note that we do meet monthly. We do have representation from our most important key partner, Wake County, themselves, with 2 members that are participating at each meeting. We also have facilities design and construction, maintenance and operations, school choice planning and assignment, finance, and academics. We have very good dialogue and really, frankly, just open meetings, discussion, talking through, as you can all imagine, a litany of topics that are directly related to the CIP. And, even though I think it's important to note that as we hit 2022 and we actually begin to meet bi-weekly, there certainly is a heavy lift with a lot going on. During the portion of the year where we're not actively engaged, once we have an approved CIP for that respective year, we still meet as a group on a monthly basis. So we still remain engaged and are talking about relevant topics. Next slide, please. So this will give you all a snapshot as to the schedule and the respective deliverables as we look into 2022. Several key components to that schedule. Important to note that not yet 2022, but some of those have certainly already been in motion. There's been work going on behind the scenes, conversations and meetings. Student enrollment, certainly an understatement to say that that's critical, that's key, a key component. Began going back as far as October and continues, and I should say will continue into the month of February. Program assumptions is a key document that we utilize that really contains the key components of our CIP, and the team is looking at that as we speak, and we'll comment, and we will be bringing that back to you all in the month of February, much as we did last year. School prioritization, Dr. Martin alluded to that in the prior presentation. That's going to be two-pronged. There is the assessment that's currently being done for our oldest schools. There's also an assessment that's being done by FD&C with respect to the top 6 schools on our top 25 list, as you may recall, from this year. As Mr. Strickland mentioned, we expect the first to come in January. We expect the other to do that as well. Those will be key pieces of data and information that we'll be evaluating and reporting back to you all. Ultimately, that will drive a big piece of a recommendation for 2022 as it relates to the new school and major renovation balance and component. Cost model, obviously very straightforward. We'll be running the numbers and we'll be reporting back to you. We'll be working on that actually, that's actually underway, and we'll be working on that thoroughly next month, and then reporting back to you all in February, again, as we did last year. We will also be planning to come to you likely in the month of February, just with an overall update, just giving you the meat of the various components that we've been working on. Last year we came to you, we had some pretty significant changes with respect to the rubric. And in fact, it took a total of 3 meetings. It was initially, as you recall, in the previous fall. We came to you all last February. We took your feedback and comment, and then came back in the month of March to get your consent and wrap it up. A lot of that's going to be, again, driven by the timing of the assessments and our ability to review and come to you with some sort of a consensus recommendation. I think the thinking at this point is we would like to be able to come to you initially in February. It's a bit premature to know if that, in fact, can happen yet. It may be March, and if it requires a follow-up like we did last year, it could be February, March, April, just kind of depending on the timing of the data, and certainly be updating you all as we're progressing. That leads us to the month of March and April, much the same last year, where we came to you with that full update. April, certainly, if there's anything at that point that requires us, timing-wise, to come back and share with you, and then just do a final review of everything that we've been working on, recommended, bringing the entire package, and certainly taking any feedback, comments, questions, with the ultimate goal, like last year, taking it to the first work session for the board, first Tuesday in May. Next slide, please. Again, just a snapshot at the process, talking about all the key components that we as a team are already, some of these are already in motion. Others will become in motion as we all come back from the holiday break. We talked about these, but we'll hit them again one more time. We talked about student enrollment, our program assumptions, that key guiding document, the standards and guidelines. These are obviously, you heard a lot about that in our previous presentations when we talked about Buckham Elementary School with the schematic design. So that has actually been in motion for the last couple of months when we talk about our design guidelines and our legs. School prioritizations, we just hit on that, talking about the feasibility studies that are currently underway and that we'll be coming back and reporting to you important data and recommendations. Cost model, obviously, not an easy time right now, as you all understand, with the volatility in the market, but we've been spending time looking at trends and trying to understand the best way to be the most prepared for next year and beyond with respect to the cost for the 6 projects that we expect to be bidding between now and end of Q2 of '23. And then lastly, adding all the parts and pieces as we bring the formal executive summary to you all with respect to the dollars. Next slide, please. One more time on the timing. Certainly not in January yet. As I noted, we are in December, and there was even some things that were already, some key components that were already in motion, going back even into October. But we look at, moving forward officially in 2022, a review period occurring next month when we come back from the holiday break, coming to you in the months of February and March with various updates, recommendations, gaining certainly your feedback and taking your comments, and then ultimately with the goal seeking your approval in April, and then taking that to the full board first week of May. Next slide, please. And here we are. Happy to take any questions, comments, feedback from you all.
Comments, questions? A lot of work starting to happen.
It's just that time of year again.
It is that time of year.
So Douglas, when we talk about the CIP updates that will be coming up before the approval later in the spring, what sort of form or format do you think those will take? I mean, will you go through these different items like technology, what's changed with technology, what our needs are, what we're putting in, or do you imagine all of these will be put together in a comprehensive document, or how are you going to approach that?
So last year, if you recall, when we talk about our assumptions document, that addresses the key components, as we say, the framework of each of the key areas of the CIP. And as you recall, that was one of the key items that we actually updated last year when we updated the ratio, the technology ratio for students to a one-to-one basis.
Yeah.
So expect that we'll be following the same approach this year as historically we have.
Yeah.
That'll capture all the key parts and pieces, the content, of the CIP.
So everything will be in one comprehensive document, but then we can pull out questions for discussion just around what has changed, why it's changed, and you'll be able to provide that.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
When related to our discussion around Balkan, and I've heard this from a number of board members, but I think we need to give special attention in thinking about the CIP to a lot of these older schools. The new schools that we're building are phenomenal from a safety perspective, from a learning perspective, from lots of perspectives, but we've got a lot of older schools. The foot's off the gas a little bit with some of the growth. I mean, we've got areas of the county where it's still flat out, right? But that gives us a time to think about addressing some of these older school needs. And it strikes me that that's something that, if my memory is correct, will be 2022. So it's likely that there will be a bond. The commissioners have to decide how they want to fund it. We simply state these are the needs, but the commissioners will have to decide how to fund. But I fully anticipate that, given that it is an even year, there probably will be a bond referendum. And so I think communicating what goes into the CIP is really critical. I think your point, right, the technology issue, that's changed. That's going to require more dollars. 1-to-1 requires more dollars than 1-to-3. So we can't do this kind of change and pretend that there's no cost impact to it. But likewise, right, what are the pieces that we want to highlight? And I think communicating those early and often is going to be really critical, since we are likely to go to the voters. Chairman Haffey.
And thank you, Dr. Martin. And I think we are looking at having not only, I think I agree wholeheartedly with the renovation piece. I mean, as the board member where I think we've had more new schools in Western Wake than other parts of the county, obviously that's because of growth. But we can't neglect our existing schools. You know, Buckham is one school where that was a need, but we know that that goes to every district of every person that sits at this table. We can probably think of multiple schools that are in a similar situation, and those schools can't wait. Because as we talked about with print, that impacts market share, that impacts public perception of how well the school functions, regardless of the quality of education that you see inside of the school once you walk inside those doors.
So to clear, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, to clarify both of your points, there is indeed a bond referendum that will be on the ballot next November, and it will be for the next 2 years of the CIP. The current bond covers years 22 and 23, and then the bond referendum on the ballot would be 24, 25. And absolutely agree with your points about the need for balance as it relates to the new schools and the major renos. The currently approved 7-year CIP reflects design dollars for 2 major renos in 24 and 2 in 25.
Ms. Carter.
Well, I was just going to agree with the older schools, and I just think we have a lot of inequities that are glaring. I won't go into naming schools, but I just really feel like it's got to be addressed, because it definitely is impacting not only our market share, but our perception of Wake County in general in some of our areas. And for those of us who aren't getting new schools, or hardly any new schools in our district, it's a huge issue. And I hear about it from constituents and, you know, folks in the schools. And I just really hope we can make some good, positive steps.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the couple schools that are slated, I think, are great, but they far from meet the need. Right, 2 schools at a time, when you have 192 schools.
Sure.
That's getting close to 100, about 85 years, right, on a cycle, and we're supposed to have like a 40-year cycle. So that means, right, if we've got 192 schools, to make it 200 for easy figuring, if we do a major renovation every 40 years, that's 5 a year. We need to think about that, because our current plan is 2 a year. So at our current pace, we cannot do what we designed for. So we really are, based on our current plan, our design is for an 85-year renovation cycle. And we know that an 85-year cycle is not what our schools need. So let's just keep that in our mind. The 7-year plan is great in that it keeps us regularly thinking about it. And we got away from, which 10 years ago when I ran for this position was a big deal, right? We got to get away from the crisis to bond, because then we come out with this, big, crazy bond that scares everybody away. The downside of our 7-year cycle is we get into the rut and say, well, we do what we can afford. And 2 schools a year is what we've decided we can afford. But I just want to highlight that, that's an 85-year life cycle that we're requiring. And so at some point, we're going to have to look at this 7-year plan and say, it's not enough. We've got to kick it up a notch. Because if we want a 40-year life cycle, that means we're renovating 5 schools a year.
And Chairman Martin, to your point, I think the discussion on, year-round and having that trigger that we're going will help balance out a little bit in our higher growth areas, but it's not going to get us to, 85 to 40 years with that. But I think there's been a lot of work done, especially, coming out of this committee and coming to the board where we can help mitigate that as we move forward. We're not, hopefully not done building new schools as more people move to Western Wake County, but I think we know a need. Everyone on this board knows the need for equity within our schools, and equity is also making sure that the building facility is equitable to other parts of the county.
Other points of discussion for our CIP thinking and planning?
I mean, just one other point of discussion. I mean, again, this goes back to all the work you all have done with school prioritization as well, and the rubric, because I think, what we see is with all of these needs, we need to have an organized, objective system, for how we order them. But one thing that's built into this is that when you do have something that's come up, almost like in a crisis or something like that, that it's weighted appropriately, right? So where you have system failure, where we talk about our security audit and things that might be very time sensitive that we need to work in as soon as possible, some of these can be weighted appropriately in that rubric. So they're not waiting behind what might just be more of like an aesthetic improvement. So.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? I don't see any hands online. Well, very good. Work to be continued. Thanks for the introduction of CIP 2022.
Thank you very much.
And we'll all work together on this. All right, the next item of business that we have is our new business section, something that we've added to the facilities agenda. I don't see us necessarily taking a facilities meeting to do the kind of the strategic planning that like we did last year, because I think we're going to have a whole board retreat with broader strategic planning. I think facilities will need to be a part of that. I fully expect it will. And we're, as Mr. Congdon noted, we're hitting into a time where there's going to be a lot of stuff brought to the board, but I want us to be thinking, right, once a lot of that routine stuff, once the CIP is done, what are the things that we want to tackle as a facilities committee? I think it's good for us to start thinking about that now so we can kind of start to get it on the docket, because just like the SNAP Primp idea that was brought up a long time ago required a lot of staff work. We've got to a much better place than we would have if we would have just had, here's a presentation of what it currently is. I think we've moved to a better system. So start thinking now about what are some of those things that we want to put on the docket for probably, April, May-ish? is when, because we're probably going to be pretty full through, right. So my thoughts at this stage is, thinking back through what we talked about in our last discussion, we've hit a lot of those topics. I think the one that we haven't hit substantially is sustainability. And so we might want to be thinking in that direction. Mr. Strickland and I were just talking before the meeting about, some of the issues about, our food preparation spaces, our kitchens, right? That's one area of sustainability, but we've got quite a number of areas of sustainability that I think we want to keep it on the topic, but think about, sustainability is a big idea. How do we want to put it into bites that we want to address? Mr. Strickland.
So timing being what it is,
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I think it's called the Wake Cubed Committee. So they're representatives from WCPSS, Wake Tech, and Wake County. We met yesterday. It was a group that used to meet once a year to talk about sustainability, energy efficiency, the whole picture of doing the right thing and conserving our resources. So it had not met for some time, likely due to COVID, but Emily Lucas with the county, she and I talked about this, and so she's kicked it back off. So we met yesterday, and we'll begin meeting maybe 3 or 4 times a year to talk about those very things. The Wake Tech does some really neat stuff with sustainability stuff, and we do some things as well, but it's good to get everybody together that's under that one funding umbrella to see what we can learn from each other. So great timing with that.
Yeah, I think we really need a kind of a combination of what are we doing, because not everybody knows that, and what do we need to do, and what are some strategic opportunities. So I think there's a lot of things that we do well in terms of sustainability, but like I said, Mr. Strickland and I were talking about, just go watch lunch and look at the volume of trash that we generate. What can we do about that? Do we need to go back to, washing trays and plates as opposed to disposables? Right? There's just a lot of questions here. We've got things we do well and things that we need to work on. Ms. Maffey.
Oh, I wholeheartedly echo sustainability, and I think, the facility standpoint of sustainability is a huge part of that. And Dr. Martin, you may remember, we started in facilities probably 3 years ago to talk about what a sustainability plan would look like, and I'm not sure what got off of the ground with that, but I'm excited to see this come back and come forward and brought up. We go into the Wake Tech East groundbreaking, and hearing President Rawls talk about the geothermal pools that they're doing, because their buildings are going to run off of geothermal energy. I don't know that we're there yet, Mr. Strickland. I feel like that might be above our what we can afford, but I think just moving in that mindset, not just environmentally, but little things.
So I don't want to discount the fact that we haven't looked at sustainable issues. So I just want to make sure that's out there, because when Nate Slavic and I had this conversation some months ago, we have looked at a lot of things that people deem as sustainable. And I'll give you one example. So ice storage used to be a thing, and it's where you create ice for cooling during off-peak hours, and then you use that cooling throughout the day. And there are lots of things that we have looked at that like some things in some bathrooms that just didn't work for us in the environment that we use. The Wake Tech, they have a different client base, but we're all serving students, and it's all public money. I do think by getting this Wake Cubed group together, we can learn and share. And again, I think it's important to note that sustainability could look different for us than it does those other groups. For example, the county has a lot of buildings that are vertical. And so in terms of solar, they don't have the opportunity because they don't have the square footage. But I think it could look, and it would look different for each of our groups.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's such an important point, Mark, which is why I think we really do need a little bit the 101. What are we doing? Even in the discussion today, thinking about the Buckham renovation, right? There's a lot of sustainability that goes into that planning, from water runoff to building placement to natural lighting to outdoor spaces. There's maintaining the planting buffers, just to name a few. And we are largely building to LEED standards. We just don't pay for that certification. So we're doing a lot. And so I think it would be valuable to have a little bit of a sustainability 101 highlighting some of what we do, but then also have an opportunity to look at, here are some strategic things that we could do that would, make a future impact. Mr. Haggerty.
On sustainability, again, I concur, and we had some board members that went out to the ribbon cutting they had for Con after its renovation, and I don't know if it was the design team or the building team, but someone had put together just a wonderful document that went through everything they did intentionally in terms of sustainability, had all of the features, and I think that would be a good model that we could use for a future meeting to kind of show what we're doing in these projects that we have around the county. I do want to say, with sustainability, as we look at it, we've talked about a bunch of different ways we can address sustainability. Do we look to include sustainability in our planning for our strategic plan? When we had these discussions before, I know it's been some time, I'll tell you, I've been somewhat skeptical of a sustainability plan where we bring in a contractor, pay them a lot of money, there's a lot of public engagement, and then they produce a plan that goes in a binder and sits on a shelf and is never used, versus more of a sustainability policy, which kind of governs day-to-day operations. And rather than like a sustainability employee, it's something that like senior leadership actually utilizes in all of their operations, and it has more buy-in from everybody, something I'd like to see come up and embraced through the management and the administration of the organization. So I think all of these are great. And I did have one other topic, too, just to bring up as we talk about these. I know early in 2022, we're going to, in another forum, have more discussion about calendar options and some of the things that are available to us as we look at crowding and utilization of facilities. And if we're doing that in early 2022, it might be that by summer of 2022, whatever comes out of those discussions might be appropriate for facilities, in terms of if facilities are retrofitted, if facilities are converted, something like that. So just to get it on the radar in your long-range planning.
Quite agree. I mean, I think this committee helped move the calendar prioritization to the broader work, but we're not there yet. and that really, you're right, it has an impact on academics. It has an impact on schedules, buses, transportation, but very clearly on facilities as well. So yeah, we want to make sure that doesn't get lost. Ms. Carter?
And I don't know if this is for facilities or not, but I'm just going to throw it out there because we did discuss it when we had our small groups, and several groups had mentioned coming up with like a county-wide resource or resources that are available, because, like a PTA here might be able to afford an outdoor learning space versus over here we have no PTA. But there are so many companies that are willing to donate. But if schools, don't have the ability to do all that contacting, and someone already has it, right? If there's a way to create something that can be shared district-wide to assist with that. And I just throw it out here because I've heard about it a lot related to facility needs for schools that we aren't necessarily meeting, but those in the community are stepping.
Right. Because there might be things that would come in through, through the needs portal, or maybe through the current modification portal, but probably coming through the needs portal that we can't do because we just don't have a big enough budget for SNAP or PRIMP. But there may be several of those kinds of things that, creating a portal, a GoFundMe type portal where we can say, hey, here are needs, Red Hat, GlaxoSmithKline, whoever, SAS, step in and be that PTA to put up, awnings on playgrounds, you have it. So I think that's a really good idea and might partner very nicely with some of this restructured SNAP Primp idea. Yeah, important idea.
Well, I'm thinking, not only corporate partners, but partners like Activate Good, who may, if there's a playground need, or maybe a school has gotten a grant for a playground, but they don't have the ability, and it's just waiting for somebody to build it. There's an ability to partner there, so that they can get that done. I think there are a lot of different opportunities where we can thin the walls and bring in the community. And not just, feel like it's just a very isolated process. And, I think these are schools that are a part of our community. So I think our community wants to help and maintain and, even letting them know if there's a day where they can haul mulch around a school.
Mm-hmm. No, I think this is a really good idea. I think it's likely to come up to be a part of our strategic planning discussions. I know this is something I hear a lot from fellow board members. How do we more effectively get volunteers in schools, right? We have to be careful, both in terms of the pandemic, in terms of just people coming into schools. I mean, there's a lot of safety and security controls, but we've got a strong community, and building those community partnerships is really critical. And I think this is something we've talked about on and off about for quite a few years. How do we build a more effective portal to get volunteers connected? So important idea. Let's keep it on the docket. Any other ideas that anybody wants to throw out? And again, the few minutes we spend right now in new business are not the be all and end all. I just want to keep planning it in our thinking, because the more we think ahead of time, then there's a greater chance that staff can work with us to bring it to the table. All right. The last item on our agenda then is the 3-month facility forecast. Douglas?
Okay, we'll wait for it to come up, please. Okay. So you can see, scrolling down here, we can see our topics that we had today. Do not have a board meeting next week, but as we look to the board meeting, first board meeting of the year in 2022, the MSAP grant will be brought to the work session. We do have a couple of easements that will be brought to the main board that evening. Next facilities committee meeting for this group here would be on January 12th. As we discussed previously, expect to bring you the maintenance and operations budget constraints, 22-23 capping recommendations, and then schematic design. Another schematic design for you all for the combo. As we move later into the month, the next board meeting, several topics being brought to the main board. The MSAP grant, of course, some commissioning items. Certainly 22-23 capping's a big one. Move later into the month of February, and we'll be bringing Rec Road also, that schematic design, to you all, as well as some other things that will be coming up once we get back from the holidays, and some time to marinate and understand, some of those topics that are going to be brought to the full board in the month of February. Any questions?
Thank you. On that point, for our next meeting, Douglas and I had a brief conversation about it before the meeting, but wondering about what do people think if we would shift the next facility meeting to the 19th instead of the 12th? The reason for that is twofold. One is we usually do the preparation meeting 2 weeks before the facility meeting, which would put the preparation meeting right in the middle of holiday break, which is not great for either us or staff. And then, Vice Chair of the committee, Haggerty, could run the meeting, but on the 12th, I do have a panel with the National Science Foundation in the afternoon. So the downside of the 19th is that it would be just the day after a board meeting, But the upside, the big upside, is letting staff have a little bit more time to pull the budget stuff together and not have to work quite as much over the holiday break. Does anybody have any concern if we would go to the 19th?
I have a question.
Yep.
I know that we've looked at our schedule of some other meetings coming up in January. We're going to hold a special called meeting on January 14th for the District 4 vacancy.
Provided at our work session that timeline gets consensus
Okay.
from board members, but we've asked board members to hold that date just in case.
I was thinking if, and would that be the meeting where a new member would be selected?
I believe so.
Because if so, then moving the meeting could allow for us to have the meeting with another board member present, whereas right now that seat would remain vacant. So that would mean another part of the county would be represented at those discussions. So I'm all for moving it if we can include another board member who otherwise wouldn't be there at that meeting.
Are there any objections to moving it to the 19th? Then let's do that. So again, with the new year, I'm assuming we will normally have the facilities stay at 3 o'clock on the Wednesday between the two board meetings, but we'll make the exception here for January because of the holiday schedules. Okay? Sounds good? Any other questions about the 3-month forecast? Just checking online here. Seeing no further comments, this committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.